when I got the job at Netflix, I put in my mind, I said, well, I'm doing what I thought I would be doing in 10 years time. I was living it at 24. And so I said, the next step then is, okay, what is it that I thought was my wildest dream? And the thing I always wanted to do was to combine my passion for Nigeria, for Africa, and for the advancement of Africa with my passion of design and creativity.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Chris Parker. Making the world better is what inspires all of us to get into design. We dream of making entertainment more engaging, reaching out to people and making everything more fulfilling. We dream of getting connections between people and improving their lives. And we dream about inspiring nations or the whole world. And tonight's guest is Mariam Braimah. She is a woman who's out there doing this at the most amazing international level. She's a Harvard graduate. She is a product designer at Netflix, and she is the founder of the Kimoyo Fellowship. This is a design program teaching them basic skills so that young, inspired designers in Nigeria can go out and get that job as UI and UX designer at the country's leading tech companies. She is driving revolution in Africa and is a most amazing person to see our dreams on the international stage. So much so that Medium ranked her as one of the top 10 inspiring designers in tech, not just UX, but in tech. So sit back. I hope you enjoy a conversation, and I hope this inspires you to go out there and achieve your dreams. So, Mariam, thank you for joining us on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. I think I'm in Chicago right now, and I am going through life, trying to get through 2021, the beginning of it. So far, I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Just want to point out it's the 15th of January. So to be just over 2 weeks in and still saying I'm trying to get through it, that's quite a heavy statement.
It's so real. At this point, I'm just waiting. February is going to be the restart. That's what I'm thinking. I'm going to just keep kicking the can until 1 month feels good.
All right. Now, I've read that you've been quoted as saying you want to change the status quo in design and putting Africa in the map. What does that sentence mean to you?
Yeah. Wow. It's the first time I've ever heard the terminology of me being quoted. That's pretty cool. I'm going to start saying that too. Just, I think when I made that statement, the main thing that I was really going for there is that I think this next century that's coming up is for Africa, and that comes in different forms. That comes in our music, you see it happening with Afrobeats. It comes with our film. You see that happening with Nollywood, and that type of thing. And it comes in other forms. You see it, and one of them is, to me, is technology is happening as well. You see, I think this last year alone, venture capital across Africa may have increased upwards of a couple 100% from the year prior. So you're seeing it happen across a bunch of different fronts, and to me, design seems like the natural step. And I don't want to say that it's not happening now. It's actually happening very rapidly now. It's actually always happened within Africa. But the thing is that it's never been recognized, in my opinion, or valued. So I think there's a part when I say I want to change the status quo, a part of me is like, I want to put more high focus on what's already happening. And then on top of that, with the stuff I'm doing with Camoyo, I want to bring a lot of that work to the forefront, especially when it comes to obviously product design and user experience design.
There's a whole load of questions that I can't wait to ask you about everything you just said. But for everyone listening, what is the Kimoyo Fellowship?
Yeah, no, for sure. So the Kimoyo Fellowship is a design fellowship. It's a 3-month program that's meant to take young and aspiring UX designers and teach them the basics of user interface and user experience design. I technically started in 2018 is when I got the idea for it. my whole mindset was to build the IDEO of Africa. Funny enough, at that point, IDEO says that they're a global design company and design agency, but they had no offices in any of the countries in Africa. I think now they may have opened up in South Africa, and that's no fault of IDEO. I think that's they're obviously a great company, but again, it's just also showcasing like how Africa is not thought of at the forefront of things. So that was the main catalyst for creating this. And then the other thing with Camoyo is the mindset that we're looking towards is we launched the first cohort in 2020, actually when the pandemic started. It was supposed to be in person. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Have some war stories there. I should say it was always going to be largely remote, in that people could be able to go through the curriculum on their own, and then we would meet in person weekly for like a crit. And obviously, with me being in the States, I should say obviously, but I'm based in the States. At the time, I was in San Francisco, and then most of it was happening in Nigeria, was where we launched the initial cohort. I would have joined remotely, but it would have only just me being there remotely. Obviously, with Corona, all of that changed and everything became remote, which actually helped us because we were initially going to only leave it to be in Lagos, which is not the capital of Nigeria, but almost like the New York of Nigeria. We were going to do that there. And then because it could be remote, we were actually able to expand it across all of the nation. So we ended up getting over, I believe, 560 applicants in this initial round from 6 different countries. But within Nigeria, most of them were Nigeria based and all over the country. So that was actually a positive for us there. So that's the high level of Kimoyo. I can go on and on about it, so I'll stop because I think that you had other questions.
Now, say that. So 500 and how many? 560.
560. I believe the final count was 567. I should double check that, but I believe that was the final number.
Yeah, that's incredible because I would do my day job at Loughborough University, and we got this great international reputation of producing designers and yada. We might get maybe 800 applications in a year, and we've been going for years. So in your first year to get 560 applications is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for that. That gives me a lot of hope for you to say that. But it's also it's perfect because it shows the need for it, and the need is that there's a strong. I'm going to put it this way: Nigeria has the largest population in Africa. One, it's the largest economy in Africa, but on top of that, it's the youngest because of over half the population is below the age of 25. At the same time, yeah, it's crazy, right? Which explains why you have, many people, Facebook, Twitter, Google. I think Twitter has just announced that they're opening an office in Lagos. There's a growing technology base there, and unfortunately, the skill sets are not to the strength where we need. So what you're noticing is that a lot of money is going into Nigeria. From a tech, I'll put it a different way. A lot of interest is coming to Nigeria, and VC funding is coming to Nigeria. And then at the same time, you have a lot of startup founders that are there, but they can't hire because there's not enough people who know how to code in the right way. Although engineering wise, Nigeria is stepping their game up there. But then from a design perspective, there's not enough designers, and there's a lot of people that want to be designers. They just don't have that. The skill set needed, but they may understand how to do graphic design or visual design, and they're learning by themselves in really rudimentary ways. And so it showed the need is the long story of that. So to your point, it definitely was very shocked. I thought maybe 200. we were thinking, okay, it's gonna be 200, like max. It can't be 200. I think we opened applications for 2 weeks. The first day we had maybe 150.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well done. Congratulations. So
Thanks.
What do you think people misunderstand about design in Africa?
That's a good question. I should say I was born and raised in the States. So even I misunderstand, certain things about Nigeria and then broadly the continent. So I can speak from my perspective of being a Nigerian in America. And I think the biggest misconception is kind of what I alluded to earlier, which is that design is not happening. And I think that uh, within Africa, it's probably the most creative. I don't even want to say probably. It's the most creative continent in the world, and I can say that
Wow.
confidently because you look at. I have to think. This is something that I believe. I think that creativity is a response to constraints, and I think people that are truly creative are people that can work well within a constraint, and that's what they, creative problem solvers. They have this thing, they had this issue, and then they found a creative solution, right? And so if you take that base definition, and then you think about what's the population that has the most constraints put on them. Obviously, it's Black people, but then take it a step further, and it's and you look within Africa, it's a pile of constraints. And so when you look at that and you see how people are working within there, to me, you get stronger as a creative the more and more you have to kind of deal with constraints. And I think Black people and Africans are probably the most creative because that muscle is probably the strongest for us. All we do is constraints. All we know is how to live and work within that process. So take Nigeria, for example, there's on the street when you're in Nigeria, they have a lot of people that sell stuff on the side of the road. And the way in which they'll carry, let's say, 600 pieces of, or a couple hundred pieces of food, let's say, or water, or even DVDs. You can find, you can buy anything
Mm.
on the side of the road. Nigeria, puppies, probably. Yeah. I'm not kidding. You can buy puppies. But like in that realm, that there's things that they'll hold, and the way that they've structured, those things are designed. It's a form of creativity. It's just that we don't acknowledge it and we don't appreciate it. On the same end, too. So I think that's the biggest misconception, is that design isn't happening. The other misconception is that I think that people don't have access to tools for design to happen, such as, let's say, Figma, or a laptop, or what have you, or even basic internet, which to an extent is true. Power is definitely a big issue in Nigeria, and I would say Nigeria especially. And then obviously poverty is another massive issue. But Figma is a great tool, for example, that has helped bring and democratize the ability for people to come into the design world. Sketch is only available on Mac.
Mm.
Obviously, to get a MacBook, is just the barrier of entry was just super high. Figma actually was one of the reasons why design is starting to push into and across Africa. And funny enough, my business partner in this, his name is Namso. He started Figma Africa just off of him just being interested
Wow.
in design, and he pretty much built that from the ground up. And it's across I don't know the exact number of countries within the continent, but he's largely responsible for shepherding Figma into the continent. And now you see Figma putting a big emphasis on design in Africa, because what happened is people were like, I don't need a computer. I can go to an internet cafe and be able to open up a tab and start using Figma, or I can get a PC and I can, go and open up a tab and start using Figma. I'm not that barrier of entry was decreased. So I would probably say that's one of the biggest misconceptions. And then secondly, I think is that people think that, there's not a middle class, and the middle class is rapidly growing across Africa, not just Nigeria.
Wow. So with all this, it sounds incredibly exciting what's going on over there. Is that why
Yeah.
you were passionate about getting Netflix Nigeria off and running?
Yeah, it's funny. When I got the job at Netflix, I've been at Netflix now for 4.5 years. Which is wild. It feels like it's only been like a year. But when I got the job at Netflix, I had joined as a growth designer, meaning that I was working on like acquisition and new user sign up. And at that point, we had only been global for about 6 months. Prior to that, and when I say global, net, what happened was January 1st, 2016, Reed Hastings, our CEO, went to CES, and he said, we're flipping the switch right now. We just flipped the switch. Overnight, we're available in over 100 and something countries, right?
Mm.
And they just turned the switch on, and just like you could type Netflix anywhere in most countries, and then something will come up, and whatever happened, whatever happened. And then we kind of saw what markets were responding to that and decided to focus on there. Nigeria and Africa were not one of the places on there. And then obviously me understanding and being Nigerian, understanding that Nollywood was between Nollywood and Bollywood, they go back and forth, but it's either the second or third largest movie industry in the world behind Hollywood. It felt like a natural, it seems like a natural fit there. And so, and nobody at that time, people were still mostly tech, most of like the tech world was focused on India as the emerging market. And so I get it. It was, the infrastructure is there. The things you needed to focus on for an emerging market were there. But my biggest push is that was that in Nigeria, one, people were not focused on it at all. And two, it felt nice to get in there early. So that was really kind of where it was more personal, where it's just like, this feels like a good business move. Now it's great 4 years later, which is, and I'll get into this in a second or later on, but 4.5 years later, ironically, when I was running the fellowship, and when we were going through this first cohort this summer, we just launched a mobile only plan that was specific for Africa, and one of those countries is Nigeria. And so we're starting to see us start to focus on the African media market. It took 4 years, so but it happened. And so that was really most of my joy, is that, hey, look, I want to see our content told across the world, and Nollywood for me travels more out of just Nigeria. People across the continent watch it, but then you have all of the expats that are outside of the continent that are watching. I think I was in the Bahamas and they were watching Nollywood content. Just like, what? like stuff like that. Like, really, it was not the Bahamas, sorry, in Trinidad. I was like, oh, I'm Nigerian. They're like, oh yeah, like I watch Nollywood. And you're just like, what do you mean you watch Nollywood? And there was no platform at the time for that to happen. So it's really exciting to see that Netflix is starting to look at that. And I think now they can stop calling me the Nigeria girl at Netflix. They don't call me that, but a lot of times, if anything came with Nigeria, they would send it to me.
I know it's good to have reputation for something, even if it just powers one thing. But,
yeah, exactly.
Is Nollywood the best way for people to experience this creativity from Nigeria, or other place that you would recommend people go to really see what's happening that they might not have seen before?
And but let me get clarification on that. When you're saying experience of creativity, is mostly from a like a film's perspective, or it's just generally broadly creativity?
Let's go general.
Okay. Yeah. No, not at all. Like, it's so wild. It's I'm gonna go off on a tangent perhaps, but like to put it this way, Nigerians in America are the most educated immigrant class in the States. Nigerians in general. I think at Harvard it was like 1 in 4 African American or people of African descent were Nigerian. Right. Wow. Just to put that into perspective. I think in medical doctors in the U.S. Majority of them are Nigerian. Like, it's just, you see the creativity in different ways. So there's education is a big thing in Nigeria. Doesn't matter. Talk to any Nigerian kid, like, education is huge, but I think a lot of immigrant kids deal with. But the funny thing about it is that creativity, up until recently, creativity was not something where they're like, oh, like Nigerian parents weren't telling their kids, don't be a doctor, go be an artist. That was not the mantra, right? But ironically, we are probably some of the most creative people. So like across music, I don't know if you've ever heard of Fela Kuti, but like Fela Kuti was like our Bob Marley. He passed away, unfortunately. But to put it into perspective, Paul, this is the Beatles. Who's the guy? Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney used to go to Nigeria to just meet up with Fela Kuti, right? You had B.B. King that performed in Nigeria. I think Motown at one point wanted to open a music industry in Nigeria. Fela actually was against that, right? But like, this is in the 70s that we're talking about this. But now you look at Wizkid, Burna Boy, Naira Marley, like you have a bunch of people, but even Wizkid and Burna Boy, for just to name a few. That's all Nigerian music. That's Afrobeats. Afrobeats has become one of the most popular genres in the world. So you have the creativity there. And again, Nigerian parents are not the ones being like, you should be a musician. That's not what's coming out of their mouths, right? And so, and it's almost, again, that constraint that you have, which is like, it just comes out. So Fashion is a whole nother thing that I haven't even gotten into, but in Nigeria, the fashion industry is exploding. Animation, even where people are learning how to tell African stories using cartoon forms, like that is also exploding. So there's so many different ways. If you just go to Google Nigeria, you're going to see different ways that the country is exploding. And the tech of it all is the funny part, is that technology, Twitter especially, is putting a lot of that and pushing a lot of that to the forefront. That you can see. And so I think that it goes across that country has so many resources, and I'm not going to get into the government side of things, but it is very unfortunate, because I think the only thing that people think of when they hear Nigeria is like, scamming, corruption, and that type of thing. And really there's so much that comes from there. And there's so many people that have come out of there, both myself, I mean, not myself, but like both immigrants and children of immigrants, that it's the creativity goes across the gamut there. So I went on a long tangent, but that's what I feel. And like, if you want to find the creativity in Nigeria, just Google Nigeria, and you'll find a lot.
So I'm really wishing that I was doing a video podcast now, because obviously you can hear Mariam's voice, but I can see on her face just how passionate she is about this, and it makes me want to just run off to Google now and start searching. So let's kind of wait till after. So let's go back to where you get started. So you are now in UX design. You've definitely got a degree of success, however you want to measure that, and I'm sure you want to achieve more things. But how did you first get started in the world of UX design?
Yeah, this is probably one of my most favorite questions, because it actually ties into the thing I was just saying, where I got started in design. I've always been someone who likes art, and I like to draw, and that type of thing. And again, Nigerian parents are like, you're not going to be an artist. And so I told my parents in 8th grade, though, that I wasn't going to be a doctor. So that was my first time I had a sit-down conversation. It's just like, got to rip the Band-Aid off. Like, I'm not going to be a doctor, so just get that over with. Maybe I'll look into engineering. I liked math at one point in my life, but I didn't like science. But I always knew I liked drawing. And I think I feel like it was in high school, I took an architectural drafting course. And that was the first time that I got into the world of architecture. And I started understanding, like, oh, people create these buildings and people decide these things. They decide this goes here and this goes here. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be an architect. And I've told the story a few times, but like my whole thing is that I wanted to be an architect, and I wanted to redesign how people think about lower income housing. My whole thing is that I think that people, the constraints of again, going back to constraints, but the constraints of lower income housing are very similar to the constraints of prison housing and prison architecture. And I think even the way prisons are built in, America are terrible, but they're thought of to be a space to confine versus a space to rehab or rehabilitate, I should say. But that's a whole other side story. But when you look at it, the core thing, and I could see how people would look at this, but you're trying to build a space for a large population of people that can withstand the test of time. So with materials that are lower cost, because you're trying to build a lower cost housing. So what happened, and this was my hypothesis, is what was happening is that if you look at a lot of, specifically in New York, where I was born, but a lot of the lower income housing in New York and project housing in New York looks eerily similar to prison architecture, in that there's bars on the windows. It's made of bricks. You have linoleum. You have very cold material. And I had this hypothesis, which is that I think that the way in which you are where you live, and the way in which you build spaces is going to equate to how people react to them and how people are built in them. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to redesign it, and hopefully, like, you can start introducing like greener architecture. You can start introducing for example, like, instead of cement everywhere, crazy idea, why don't you put a park, like in a space. And what I noticed in this, I ended up not going into architecture, but what I did notice is that people have taken on this mindset of like rethinking how they're designing these spaces. And when they have changed the spaces, and kept the residents the same. What you see is a drop in crime. You see a drop in offensive crime or violent crime, but you also see a drop in just general crime. You see an increase in overall community happiness. And it's I think there was a place in the Bronx that they did this exact experiment, and they're now starting to try to push it out to other places in New York City.
Is this the smash window experiment?
I don't know what's the smash window experiment. That sounds fun. What is that?
So I can't tell you what decade it was done, but the theory was that, you got an area, gets poorer. At some point, somebody smashed a window. And then once you see this broken window, that's an invite subconsciously to just go, hey, we don't have to look after this place. We don't have to look after each other. We can just trash this place, and crime moves in. Then they took another neighborhood and made it really nice, you were saying, and the opposite happened.
I know what you're talking about. That was I feel like that was Giuliani's time, either Giuliani or Bloomberg that spoke about this. Yeah. So it's that theory was more related to crime, not necessarily the design of the community, but it's a very similar mindset. Is again, like if your space looks deteriorated, you're not going to respect it, and it's also going to feel like you are not respected in turn. Right. And so it all ties. I think it all ties together. But unfortunately, I feel like with that smash windows concept, that the mayor at the time was trying to increase police presence in a lot of these spaces. And that's usually what happens, is versus like getting to the root of the problem, which is that the environment is not sound and it's not designed well. And that's just like across, not even just the physical structures, but just even just like access to public transportation, access to, healthy foods, that type of stuff. Right. And so that long story short, I want to be an architect. That was the plan. I tried to do it. Sorry, I got deviated.
Now, please deviate as much as you like. Like what you're saying about the environment is, I was in New York a few years back, and I'd heard this podcast. I think it's 99% Invisible. They were talking about the Bowery. And I was going, hey, I'm going to New York. I can go to the Bowery. Which I'm sure everyone in New York is thinking, why? What? And I was there just as it was becoming really gentrified, and you still had these, I don't know how you describe it. It looked like you'd taken something from about 30, 40 years ago, and then every fourth building slipped a hipster custom jeans craft workshop in between. So that's kind of when I was there. But my colleague who I was visiting New York with, she felt so scared just being there. No one said anything. Nothing happened. There's nothing I can point to, but just the space scared her. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. The architecture was so oppressive in that one space, which traditionally had been, that's where you go when there's nowhere else to go.
That's an interesting story, because it's just like it's weird because you can't put words to it, but the feeling, and so you're trying to explain, like it sounds like your colleague was trying to explain, like, this feels off, and I can't fully put my hand on it, but I know it has something to do with the space, but it feels off. It's like feng shui on crack almost, like in that realm. But it's true. It's coming. This is not all of New York. It's just specifically the places that have access to less things. Like it's a sad result of things. But I know that actually I think New York is the housing department, or what do they call it? I forget what the name of the agency is. Department of Buildings, DOB. But Housing Authority, they actually released the first open source architectural planning sort of thing. And their whole thing was, here's a lot of the research and the experimentation that we've done in terms of revamping and revitalizing lower income housing. And these are the things we've noticed that are working. And they shared it with the broader architectural world. And it almost is like similar to, this is what ties back to user interface and product design, is that it felt almost like a style guide. You go on Google material and you like, oh, they use this radius, for their thing, and they've noticed that you should keep the labels here, right? That type of thing, but apply to broader architecture, and not even just architecture, really city planning. When you look at it, and they just kind of opened it up and said, hey, look, here's what we're doing. We found that this is working. Maybe it might work in other places. I don't know if other places are using it. I don't know if, I'm not as in tune in the architectural world. But it was really, really nice to see. Granted, I will still say that New York City especially is still struggling with how to come through on all of their promises. But it's a start.
Mm-hmm. So let's pick up from architecture school. So you were a young girl who wanted to be an architect.
Sorry, I completely forgot. Yeah, so wanted to be an architect. Then I went to college, and I loved the architectural drafting portion of it. But I hated physics, and physics didn't like me, and I failed physics terribly. And I was also looking at the job market at that time, and I was noticing that to be an architect in the States is almost, you have to be in school for as long as like you want to be as a medical doctor, and but the returns are a lot less. And so just from a financial perspective, and also from the fact of like, I was like, this physics thing is not for me. It was a really quick, I don't want to say quick, it was probably a year and a half into college, but the decision was one that became very clear that this is probably not the field that I'm going to prosper in. And so from there, I took a coding course, and it was an introduction to computer science. I think I've always liked computers. I like technology, I like gadgets. So let's just see here. I went into that course, and it was just a bunch of coding. It was mostly back end stuff, and they were using Basic C to teach us how to code, which is not the easiest language to understand. And I'm thinking they're going to do front end and all this. And they started talking to me about arrays. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for. And so I stopped going to class, which you shouldn't do. You should go to class, sure. But I stopped going to class. I just kept building a portfolio. I was just like, I'm just going to do graphic design, thinking still like, I want to be in the design space. I knew I wanted to do that. And then I decided to go to class when they were showing front end. There was one day that they spoke about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That was one day. And I went to that class, and they spoke about the genesis of it all. And they started talking about graphical user interfaces. That was the first time I heard about it. I'm a junior now, like fall, I think is this. And so I have one more year left. And that's when I was like, wow, this thing of user interface and creating an experience is very eerily similar to architecture. I say this a lot, but it's the same mindset that you have to apply to create an application or to create a digital interface. It's a similar mindset that you apply to like creating an architectural plan. It's just that the medium shifted. So instead of working in physical spaces, I'm working in digital ones. That switch happened immediately. And it's kind of just been, I just taught myself from there and was like, I got to move to San Francisco. If I can get a job, like fine. If not, I'm still just going to be there and try to find a job. And just the rest has been history. It's the best decision I ever made. And I should say now, my parents love design. They're big fans of design now.
Really?
Yeah, they're definitely like, oh yeah, be a creative. If it gets you to Netflix, sure, be a creative. Although once in a while, my dad will say, "You sure you don't want to go back to school, and be a doctor?" And so that does come out a little bit.
Trust me, being a doctor is not as great as you think it is. And let's talk about the other kind of doctor, in which case, maybe so.
Yeah. I'm good. I think I like playing in Figma. I'll stay here.
So how did you get from sort of learning about UI and these experiences to becoming a product leader at Netflix?
Yeah, I think the thing that I really focused on when I got to San Francisco was I really want to work for Google. That was my dream. I was like, okay, I'm going to do 2 years at this role. I started this company called Inflection. It was a smaller, mid-sized company. And for the most part, I love that. That company was my jumping off point. It was a job I had right before Netflix, but it allowed me to experience all different forms of digital design. I was able to play a creative director role. I worked with email. I worked with acquisition. Mostly, I was working with acquisition and growth. And then I even got the chance to manage a team. So I was able to kind of quickly get my hands on many different facets of like design. And I remember when I left, I left as a design manager. That was the first time I finally grasped that design also works with just even how you're thinking of how to structure your team. And like people management and that type of thing. I have no desire to be a manager, though. But like, but I was able to kind of understand that how that applied there. And so through doing all of those things, when I got to San Francisco, I also capitalized on the fact that at that time, design was very much becoming a field that people like realize is necessary. And so I think I challenged myself when I first moved out there. It was like I was going to do a hackathon like a month. Once a month. And I think I came through on probably like 80% of those. But that helped me while I was working and doing my day-to-day job and gaining rapid experience there. Doing the hackathons also then helped me understand different people, different problems, and be able to start seeing that this design process can be applied regardless of product, right? So sometimes I did hackathons where it was like Internet of Things, or sometimes I'll do hackathons where it was like working on Google Glass, right? And so like I was able to kind of dip my toe in those different areas, and so I think that also helped me understand just like the broader skill set of like how to work with different partners, how to work with engineers, how to work with people who actually don't understand or value design, and by the end of a hackathon are actually like interested and like how to kind of get people in that realm. So then from there, Netflix happened where I was like, it's ready, it's time to go. I applied to Google, and then someone told me about Netflix, and I didn't even know they had a design team. But I talked to a recruiter, and 2 weeks later, I was hired. I was like, whoa,
Wow.
Okay, this is moving. Yeah, we move really fast at Netflix hiring. So if you're ever trying to get a job at Netflix, just know that it's going to be a very quick end-to-end process. Google was a bit longer, but the thing that drew me to Netflix in particular was that I really wanted to work on a global platform. At the time, Inflection was just US based. I wanted to work on a global platform to understand like how to design for people at scale. And then I also wanted to work in a place that I was able to have impact on honestly just a larger brand. Like I thought I needed a brand, which I think I did. Need a big brand to kind of solidify myself in this design world and feel like I belong, so to speak. So Netflix kind of offered all of that, but it offered all of those things with still like a startup vibe. When I joined, the team was only 40 people or so. And most of them it was a fairly older team compared to where I was coming from. The startup world was like, I think it was like 20, most of us just got out of college. I get to Netflix and like you're talking to people they're having kids and, like, so it was a really quick shift. And I think I was 24 when I joined the team. And I think like the average age was probably early 30s. So I had to kind of also grow up there as well. And so, but at Netflix, I was able to I worked on the acquisition stuff, which is what I was working on before. But I also was able to use and wield that brand in different ways where working on like, hey, within the Netflix, even within the Netflix culture, there were, I think when I joined, it was probably less than 3% of people were Black employees, or less than the 3% of the overall workforce were Black. And it wasn't something that I was trying to be like, I want to change this number. I don't even think we had the number then. I just knew that like, I really liked working at the company. And I thought that there needs to be more Black people. And so it was one of the first times that I kind of jumped into like designing a culture for us. And I've spent a lot of my time doing that in addition to my role, which became this whole other thing of just like working on Strong Black Lead, working on, we have this thing called Afrotech and getting Netflix to be more involved in the Black community, in the States at least. And I think all of that started to come to a culmination with where I am now at the company, which I don't think I've said. I work on the TV team now. So I switched from being non-member, like I've basically worked on any portion from you Googling Netflix all the way to you watching Netflix on the TV. So that's been really cool to kind of be able to switch from both of those sides.
So what's the design process like inside Netflix?
It's fairly similar to, and I want to say it's similar to most design processes, which is comforting, because when I joined it, of course, like it's a big company, they're gonna everything, they have everything figured out and all this stuff. And like, they have more resources, yes, but it's still fairly the same. But the thing I would say at Netflix is that we don't like process. And so one of the things that we liked, and one of the ways in which we're able to move quicker, is that we don't subscribe to like, here's how we all work on product. The way you want to work is the way you want to work. And people kind of work within that, and people work within that knowledge. So, like, if I'm working with a CI partner, one CI partner may work a lot differently than the other, and we all just kind of like, our CI is consumer insights. So our research team, but they may work differently than one person, and the other person might be a lot more organized. Another person might be like, hey, I go with the flow. It all kind of works out really, really wildly. But our process is fairly consistent with what I would say most places are. So you have an insight or you have an hypothesis, and you kind of work off of that. You may go to your research team, which I would love to get into the research portion, because that's another thing where people underestimate Africa in. But you may work with your research team and your research partners and say, look, I have this hypothesis. I think that X, Y, and Z or whatever in certain regions might go well. Do you have any insights that may validate this or potentially invalidate this as well? Maybe they may have research that we've done in the past, historical research. If not, they may say, oh, this seems like a big business opportunity. We might scope it. That's when they'll work with like our analytics team. A lot of Netflix, I will say, our design is driven. It's very analytical driven. So compared to other places where maybe you don't use analytics as much, I don't want to say it's our key decision maker. It's not, but it's a huge part in deciding how we move. We're A/B testing culture and all of that. So our design really matches that. So you have to be very systematic in the way you're thinking about your experiences and creating your experiences. I hope that answered the question and wasn't too high level.
So if you're trying to hire someone to join your team and say, right, these are the skills that you got to be really hot on to work alongside us, what would you be asking for?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's a good question. I can answer it succinctly. It would be, most of the time, you need someone that can run themselves. Where most our managers are not. Their performance is not based on their team. The team, it's kind of expected that the team can run itself. Their performance is actually based on hiring. So just to put into perspective how we value how managers are valued is that if you hire good people, then the idea is that they can kind of go and run off on their own. So most of the time, a lot of the people that work at Netflix as like individual contributors have probably managed a team before, if not managed a company, been a CEO, been a VP probably of design. So I think that's the one thing, is that being able to run and start on your own, being able to find problems and do the like scavenging of trying to find answers and solutions. The other thing is then being business minded and business oriented. That was a big thing of like why I wanted to join the company, and why I think I'm able to do Kimoyo is that I built a lot of my business acumen at the company. I'm building it at the company, and I'm able to now talk about Nigeria the way I'm talking about the market or product market fit, almost as if I'm a PM, And so it's that's a lot of that is coming from Netflix. So being business minded, I think, is a pretty big one. And then the last I would say is also understanding research. And using that to kind of drive your decision. So business-minded, understanding research, and being a self-starter, I would say, are the top three.
It's great to end with that research question, because you said that research was another thing people misunderstand about Africa. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. This is like one of the biggest, craziest insights that I got in starting Camoyo, and because of COVID, is even when we created the curriculum. The mindset was always going to be that research was still going to be through and through throughout the curriculum. And so originally we were going to do like guerrilla research, and just like people go on the street, put your prototype in there, that type of thing. And like, just, like go on the street, talk to people. There's enough people on the streets in Nigeria, so you can find many participants. But the way I structured the curriculum was that we would be doing research weekly. So to the point that the designers there, that we had 5 fellows, but the designers by the end of the course they were very comfortable with research, right? Then obviously we were about to launch in March. We were supposed to launch. Corona hits, so we had to take a month and be like, oh man, yeah, like okay. So we took a month, and me and my business partner were like, okay, well, like what parts of the curriculum Do we need to shift? And the biggest thing was like, well, damn, what are we going to do about research? And from there, what kind of happened was this gem, which is that we had to build. We said, well, you know what? Everyone's online. What if we start to build a research pool of participants in Nigeria? And we start whenever we need to, like, we can calculate, okay, for each study, we'll probably need, let's say, like 8 to 10 people per, or let's say 5 to 7 people per fellow. There's 5 fellows. So we say for each study, we'll probably do like upwards to 30 people. Okay, so we started doing like the unit economics of like, okay, we need 30 people. Like, okay, in exchange, we'll give them money to participate in these studies. And in exchange for that, the designers will be able to actually talk to live participants. As we were doing that, I was looking at it, I'm like, wait, does this exist? Does this exist anywhere in not just Nigeria, but across Africa? And I was noting, like, there is no user testing does not happen across Africa. There's no like pool that you can go to like quickly get participants. And so one of the things that we ended up building in the process of this is that we have a user testing pool, a participant pool of people across Nigeria of over 600 participants, people who willingly signed up to say, hey, I want to test products. And they're people that are generally not either one that helps them. They want money. So we paid the equivalent of like $20 in Naira. But so they get money, but they also provide insights. And then on our end, it was helpful for us because our designers got to work with real live and conduct interviews with people. So we conducted over over 150 individual interviews. For the last month of the fellowship, we partnered with Netflix and Spotify. And this is where I was like, oh, I'll get into this. Netflix is just about to launch their test in Africa, and one of the markets was Nigeria. So for the first time, we were able to, this is complete like luck. But for the project, they were working with Netflix designers. And so we had to find people in our participant pool that like either knew about Netflix, didn't know about Netflix. So all those types of things, right? So I became almost like a fake research coordinator throughout all of this. But in doing that, we were able to do a study of 36 participants in Nigeria. And it was the first time that our team at Netflix, was able to actually talk to participants in Nigeria and see Nigerian consumers use the product right at the time where they're starting to focus on Nigeria as a market. And that's my old team, funny enough. So I'm like, holy crap. So my old teammates are helping me, with this product, and they see the fellows who are brand new designers. This is their capstone project. They're presenting their insights, and they're looking at like, wow, payments doesn't work here. Wow. This is, people do not trust, a Western company asking them to put their email in, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so long story short, in building Camoyo, we also started building the largest research participant organization across Africa, because this does not exist. So we're actually going to start expanding on that along with our design cohorts across different countries. So we're actually formalizing it as a platform for Kimoyo. And then the next step will be to go to Rwanda, Kenya, and then South Africa to then also expand there. So research to me is the core of design in general, but I think you already know that as well. So
it's great that you said about the people at Netflix hadn't really seen the users up until you brought them in. Yesterday I was in this really inspiring webinar, and I'm going to get her name wrong, so if you're listening, I'm really sorry. Dr. Kenyelwe Muniai from South Africa. And what she said was really eye-opening. And she grew up in, the way she described it is, imagine your stereotypical African poor village. And I'm sure we've all got this thing in our mind. So imagine it might be a chicken running across, and everyone goes, oh, you're so lucky to get out of that, poor you. She's like, no, it was great. You had a really free childhood. Everyone knew each other. Everyone was sharing just emotions, and it was the best education for empathy of others. And fast forward to where she is now, she's a real leading design researcher in South Africa. that lots of people will sit in their lovely design studios and go, right, these people in the communities, let's bring them in and let's sit them down, let's talk about this. I say, no, you've got to go to where they live and not just listen to them, but really understand that this life is different to whatever they're seeing in a city. And it's also really great. And you've got to respect that and work with it to make things really amazing. So I think what you said sort of resonates with something which resonated with me really powerfully yesterday.
Yeah, if you have that, I would love to watch that.
Well, I got on the
I don't know
podcast in a
if
few
it was
weeks'
recorded.
time.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. Okay, well, I'm listening to that. I'm subscribed then. But
excellent.
it's exactly what she said. It's crazy because when you think of a company as big as Netflix or a company as big as Google, Facebook, Twitter, there's no easy way for them to have access to people from across Nigeria, not just Lagos, not just Abuja, but people from Port Harcourt, people from places that are outside of those main cities. There's no way because there's no one has done the research, no one has built the accessible pipelines to be able to easily reach them. And like you said, you can reach them at their space. We were talking to them on the phone. We were talking to them with them in their apartment, or in their, we couldn't go there obviously, but like there was that space. So I'm 100% with you where it's just like, I think people want to see it. It's just that the platforms and the channels have not made it easy for it to be accessed.
So you're obviously really passionate about all the things you work in the Kimoyo or design. What makes you feel inspired to create so many different ventures?
I think craziness. So like no, like I think I think my mother always says this to me. She's like, you always have your hands in like 600 different things. Like, and I've always just kind of been like that. But I've even as a kid, even though I was born and raised in the States, I've always been Nigerian first, American second. And like to the point where we never celebrated July 4th. We always celebrated October 1st, which is Nigerian Independence Day. Yeah, to my to my fifth grade graduation, I wore traditional Nigerian garbs. Like my favorite artist is King Sunny Ade. Like I think I started listening to American music like maybe like really avidly in ninth grade, right? And so I kind of lived this like kind of fake Nigerian life in America. But my passion has always been lied within Nigeria and broadly within Africa, and then also within creativity. So even though I'm doing a lot of these different things, they are really like my two passions coming together. And when I got the job at Netflix, I put in my mind, I said, well, I'm doing what I thought I would be doing in 10 years time. I was living it at 24. And so I said, the next step then is, okay, what is it that I thought was my wildest dream? And the thing I always wanted to do was to combine my passion for Nigeria, for Africa, and for the advancement of Africa with my passion of design and creativity. And Camoyo kind of came out of that want and that need. And I think for me, everything that I've been thinking of as the next step after Netflix is that I want to either do Camoyo for me is I want to do that full time. Or I want to do something that is within Africa while also continuing to build Kimoyo. So my passions, I feel like my hands are in different things, but it still always ties to these core principles, which is like advancement of Africans and people of African descent, so including Black people. And then also showing that design and creativity is a viable field. You don't have to be a poor artist or a starving artist. You can actually be creative and still, be have a comfortable life. So I think that's like my biggest thing there. Those are the core drivers.
So what would you like to be remembered for?
Well, Chris, should I pay you for the therapy session or just like that's a good question. I think if I have to say that, I think I would want to be remembered for Give me a second. Let me think on this. I think that I would want to be remembered for what I'm doing in terms of democratizing design. And I don't. It's weird to say I'm, but like it's weird to think of myself in this manner, but I guess I would want to be remembered for democratizing design and making it something that's accessible. But I think the way in which we regard doctors and the way in which we regard even engineers now is the way I think that we should start. I would love for us to start regarding designers within the African and African American community. I think that because it's so abundant within our communities, creativity, it's taken for granted. And I would love for us to, and it's happening, which it's definitely happening. I'm not the shepherd of this, but I would love to be a part of that kind of renaissance, of the appreciation of like the reason why we are creative, the things that we are creating and how we're going about creating.
That's really beautiful.
I think that was a great question. I'm going to think on that more. I might have to journal about that.
Is there anything that you wish you'd done better in your journey through life until here?
This is something that I want to be better at. I'm terrible at written communication. No, I shouldn't say I'm terrible at it. I used to write poetry, but the act of communicating consistently, my mother will definitely, and my father will definitely talk about this. But I am really, when I'm in the zone of something, I'm in it, and it's hard to like come out. And so what ends up happening is that because my hands are in so many different things with this, I think a lot of times I tend to be, I hope that, can you still hear me? My boyfriend,
it's fine.
Is it? Okay, cool. But I think because my hands are in different things and then because I can get so passionate and go down the rabbit hole, I tend to kind of self-isolate with people. And so I think the biggest thing that I think I want to be better at and that I could be better, I could have done different, is being able to reach out when something wasn't working out, or if I needed help, or if I need help. I'm learning. I've gotten much better at that. But in college especially, I definitely kind of like self-isolated and it was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, what's happening, nothing works, nothing makes sense. But I went through all of that on my own. And I think I've been forced to understand that you need to be able to go out in other spaces to do that. So I would say that's the number one thing, is like knowing when to reach out, knowing how to ask for help, and being open with communicating consistently with people that you care about. Like that's my number one goal this year, is that like, even I hate texting. I hate texting. I'm really bad at social media. I'm pretty bad at like creating content, but I'll consume it. But like I miss having conversations with people, getting on the phone with people. So I need to learn how to do those things versus just like kind of being in my hole.
That's a really sort of heavy moment there.
Yeah, that's one of my resolutions.
I don't know what it's like in the States, but over in UK, as soon as COVID hit, everyone was having this kind of mini celebration where every week we'd be having quizzes online and we're having movie nights online, and we were sharing things, and it was really reaching out to our friends and being a part. And the fatigue of COVID mean that we're now in a place where we stopped doing it, and it's starting to feel a bit isolated now, about a year on in. Do you think that design can help improve any of this, improve that emotional connection between people, or is design just creating things to make money?
Yeah, no, I think design is creating things. I think that creativity is creating things, of course, obviously, but like I don't think the end all be all is just to create things for money. I think I'm a strong proponent in that. Like I think capital helps you live an easier life for sure. But if you want to create and just create, I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, do that. That's the end goal, right? But I think I can't believe that I would be someone saying this, because when it first came out, I was like, this is just guppy Silicon Valley being Silicon Valley. Like design, app can solve everything. But Clubhouse in particular, and what was the other thing called? It was before Clubhouse launched. That at the start of quarantine, people were using it a lot in the States. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a similar idea. of Clubhouse. It just wasn't audio only. It was also video. But Clubhouse has been interesting to me to see, because what I've noticed, I've actually not really, I don't use Clubhouse that much, but what I've noticed is that I work better if I'm talking, and I used to send audio notes to people, and people would be like, it's almost like when you call someone randomly these days and like, whoa, you're calling, like you didn't that type of thing. But when I send audios, I always notice that people type back and respond, right? Or they'd be like, why'd you send me audio? Like, or it was just like very jarring, even like close friends. And now I'm noticing with Club, I think because I'm attributing it to the success of Clubhouse, but because of Clubhouse, I'm noticing people are more open to using voice and just voice. And I think it's a result of the fatigue of like having to show up in front of this camera, having to, kind of situate myself so that the lighting is perfect and all that. But like with audio, I don't have to work. I can be in my bed, and I can still connecting, right? And that is me for sure, 100%. I'm in my bed. Most of my audio notes I'm probably sending from couch or from the comfort of my home. But like there's a less barrier of entry for that connection. But it's warmer than text. And you can hear the tone and that type of thing. You can so I've been seeing people a lot more receptive to audio, which is, I'm like, shout out to Clubhouse for that, because I think that's a big component of that. And so to your original question, like can design change help introduce more of this connection? I think yes. I mean, even the fact that we can use video and pick up on FaceTime is that. So I think that it can. Where I think it gets a little wonky is where this is just my opinion, but it's like, I think like, when they try to create those things, like if you hug this pillow, it lights up,
Yeah.
the light up pillows for me, and I'm like, it's too much.
Now I've got a soft spot for that because I love quirky things, and if it comes out of Japan, it's quirky, I'm going to love it. But then you kind of go, is this what you really want? As we're saying about speaking rather than texting, it's like all social networks have this framework around them, which is you're writing. And no one writes the way they speak. And when I speak to my students in person, they're like, oh yeah, cool, whatever. When they send me an email, they've suddenly grown by 40 years. And so I kind of go, look how great I am at writing. And I show people do the opposite. But I think when you speak and we can see somebody, you're using a different part of your brain. And I know, like, as a dyslexic guy, reading and writing is not something which gels well. I kind of come across, I don't know, not very clearly, but then when I'm speaking, it's game on.
That's real. That's very real. And that, you know what, as you say that, sorry, I don't mean to, I think I know we're over time, but the one thing I'll say is, as you say that, it reminds me because Google, I remember Google's put a big emphasis on speech and voice recognition and all of this stuff. But the thing that helped with it is just also that, like, again, this barrier of like being able to use technology, a lot of people cannot, like, literacy is taken for granted, and like a lot of people can't read or write, but they can talk. And like, and you're seeing a lot of those people come online for the first time, and they use WhatsApp. You see in Nigeria, people use, Nigeria doesn't have, literacy rates are fairly standard in Nigeria, but still, like, you see people using WhatsApp and they're using voice to text, right? And sometimes like one of my aunts, she cannot write. She can talk, obviously, she can speak. And so it's like what you said, where it's just like that we've almost kind of created technology that was so focused on just like writing as a form of communication. And now with audio, it is also breaking down that stuff that you just mentioned. So that is a great call out.
It'd be great to see a lot more of this brought into these apps and interfaces all around us. And we're saying that reminds me of, so my wife's Chinese. So, she's been in the UK since she was 16. She's more fluent than I am. And her parents can't speak a word English. But we've had our phones on the table using Google Translate back and forth over a beer or a bottle of baijiu. So we've got drunk together and had a great time, even though my Chinese is terrible. And it's like, this is a great thing about life. We can do this.
It's awesome when you say it, because it's like, I think what we're starting to see is this audio, like Google Translate is probably one of my favorite apps in the world. Even like AirPods, which I've had a bone to pick with Apple for a little bit, but AirPods to me are probably one of the best things they've done. And so in recent years, and it's playing with this idea of like, I think the fact that they put a computer in your ear, who knows what that's doing to our brains, but put that off to the side for a second. But like the fact that I think, imagine if you could hear, I know Google's been really interested in this, is like they could talk to you, your in-laws could talk to you while you're wearing your AirPods. It's directly translated, within there. Or the fact of like, creating augmented audio experiences. I really, really think that those things, audio as a sensory form that is expanded on, I think is the next frontier of connecting, because unlike with our phones where everything is tactical and it's like we've used touch, but the only other what do you call it, sense, the only other sense that allows you to do multiple things is audio. Like you can't see multiple things at once. You can't you can hear multiple things. You can't taste, you can't eat more than one thing, right? But like with audio, you can hear multiple things, like you can touch multiple things. And on top of it, you can hear like my partner's having a conversation in the other room. I know he's having a conversation, but I'm still focused, here with you. So it's just, I think it's like one of those, like, it feels like the great frontier that's not been fully tapped on. And even look at it with radio, like radio is probably like one of the longest, like lasting technologies. And it really hasn't changed since the days of when like Churchill, was on here talking to, talking to his constituents, right? And so it's just like, it's, I think it's time for that to happen. And this feels like, to the connection point, I feel like it's that's what's happening. But whole sidebar, but I'm with you on Google Translate, the wonders of it.
So with all these amazing technologies coming forward and everything that's going to be the next frontier of maybe entertainment, Netflix, or just getting to know people around the world, what skills do you think a young designer is going to need to thrive in this area?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's I think the first I think is writing, ironically. And even if it's not being a good writer, but in being able, in the way that it's like, oh, should designers code or should designers not code, whatever. Like, I think the next conversation is like, should designers write or should designers not write, whatever that means. And I think the core of those conversations is just like, should designers understand how to communicate with their engineering partners? Should they understand how to communicate with their content writing partners? And I think the thing of being able to understand how to work with writers, even if you're not a strong writer like myself, I think is going to be the next, is going to be a big skill set and skill advantage to have, because at the end of the day, like none of these experiences, especially if you're getting to the space where you're completely getting rid of the interface, right? And it's just words that are being exchanged, right? Like now, how does that work? And so I think that to me is like probably one of the skills that I would put there is communicating, learning how to communicate without relying on digital interfaces would be one. And then I think the other part is like I don't know. Maybe I'm just a motion junkie, but like I think that having some understanding of how to bring your designs to life, and not just the regular click through prototyping, but like even if there's something that you can do from a motion perspective of like, what does the transition look like, or that type of thing. I've noticed that, and maybe this is just because I work a lot with entertainment now, but I've noticed a lot where the smallest micro interactions or the smallest transitions or what have you, versus just going from A to B, has made the way people respond to those designs versus others. I think that they're pretty rudimentary now. It seems, and I feel like in the future it's going to be expected that people know how to do kind of like those smaller motion things that we probably say can be done in After Effects. I think eventually they're going to be things that you can just do in like a regular Figma prototype, right? That would probably be the top two. A third one, which I think this is just for anything, is knowing how to sell your work. I think regardless of what age you are, like I've seen so many great designers that can't sell their work, and it's unfortunate because it's a great idea and they just can't. They just don't know how to express it properly. So I would put those as my three.
I could pick up on any of those, but I'm going to go for designing the emotional interactions. Like how do you make a interface or experience more emotional?
That's a really good question. So, I feel like I might be beating the dead horse, but I think the first thing is the words. There was a project that I worked on when I was working on the growth design team, and it was about there's just this concept of like um, the sign up experience, right? And so at the time, I was leading the mobile sign up experience, which is a nice way to say that I was the only designer on the mobile sign up experience, right? And so that's what that means, right? And so like I was doing that, and for context, most of signups for Netflix happen on the mobile platform, right? And it's common, like with most things. Like mobile is kind of where you get the channel, it's the acquisition channel, and then people, kind of go off the other ways. So one of the things that was to try to think of it. And like when people, a lot of times when I first started Netflix, like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I help us get money. Like it's kind of the most boring thing. It feels the most boring thing, but it helped me again from a business acumen perspective. But it's not like you're not talking about content. You're like, no, I do the sign up flow, the thing you interacted with once, right? Before you get there. It's almost like when people are like, oh, what do you work on? You work on taxes, right? No one wants to do taxes, but to me, one of the best design experiences I go through is the tax. There's a tax company here called what is it called? TurboTax, and they use copy. Their copy is amazing from an emotional perspective. They've taken this thing that's super boring but super stressful for people, and they'll say like, hey, like the technical term would be like, what does 501c of your document say, or whatever, I don't know, like that type of thing. And they'll say like, did you get married this year? Congrats if you did, like stuff like that, right? And it's like it's the same thing. They're getting the same information, right? But they've made it there. So language in particular. So one of the things that I did was I had us do an audit. It was a brainstorm concept. It was probably people probably looking like, what are you doing? But like it was a brainstorm audit, and I said, let's go through our sign up flow and let's first read it out as people. Like take all our copy, the headline that says, put your password here, put your code here, like, you put your payments, blah, blah, blah. And let's just have a conversation. So the thing was that I had one designer, two of my design partners. One of them acted as the product of Netflix. And then the other person acted as a user. And we just acted it out. It was like, it was intentionally meant to be like jarring, where you had to read what it said on in our flow. And so one of my design colleagues, he starts off and the person comes up and he says, hi. That's the first thing the person I was playing the user says. They come up and they say, hi, what's up? I'm Steven. And then he read the thing and it's like, please put in your payment information. And then he was like, you just see the breakdown immediately, right? And you're like, oh, well, duh, when we put it in conversation. If this person was a salesperson, like now I said, okay, let's redo this. Imagine you're Netflix. You're trying to sell Steven on Netflix. Now, forget what we have in the flow. Now let's talk to it. And the first thing you do is say, hey, what's your name? Like not hi, we don't even say hi, we say, put your email in, right? Like, oh no, hey, what's your name? Right. And so like, even just that shifted the way we were starting to look at the flow. And so I spent a lot of time with our copywriter, my copywriter partner there, where it was like, what if we don't even change the flow. Let's just change the copy. Let's just change the language. And this gets harder because like, certain countries, like for example, I think Japan is one of them. It's weird if a company starts to speak to them like a friend. That's weird there, right? And so like the way you have to shift the tone is like you can be friendly, but you're still an enterprise. Whereas in America, you might be able to be a little bit easier, where you can be like, hey, what's up, buddy? Like that type of thing. But in Japan, they're like, what are you doing? This is craziness, right? So even that was like, we had to learn how to build language at scale, but emotion at scale is what you're talking about now. So in that realm, like we played around with a lot of different things. And what I would still say is, to this day, the things that we see have the lowest level of effort from an engineering perspective, but highest returns are changes to copy. And usually it's things that make it a little bit more emotional and human. So that's one way. The other way is from the motion side. I think Apple does a good job of this, for example, like when you type your password in to sign in, and if it's wrong, the thing shakes as if like you're saying no. So like recreating kind of more of that humanistic response, especially with motion. I think there was something we did where it's like the way in one of the buttons in the sign up flow, we played around with this. It didn't go through. It was probably too wild. But like when they submitted something, we made the button. We were like, what if it like says thumbs up, or if it changes into a smiley face? It looked kind of creepy, but like it was still something of like it was joyful and delightful. But people were kind of like, oh, it's a little too humanistic. So there's also the side of like, at what point was the emotion become to what is it, the valley of the uncanny valley, right? At what point does it get into that realm? But I believe the core thing behind it is using the proper language, or using similar language that people know, to make it feel like it's a bit more emotionally tied.
That's a great lesson. I'm going to get everybody to start acting out all of their interfaces from now on.
It's a great trick. I forgot where I learned it. That is not my idea. I watched something. I was like, oh, this makes sense. Let's do. I think Cooper Union may have used that as a brainstorming tactic. But it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. So it's been fantastic talking to you for the last hour and a bit, and I think we can go on and on because everything you're talking about is so infectious. So, and by the way, we're both wearing. Well, Mariam is wearing Apple AirPods, and I got the Jabra versions in because I prefer the color, but we're both frying our brains with these tech.
The things we do for technology.
Yeah. So last question I want to ask you is, what do you think would make the world a better place?
Oh, there's the classic answer, which is empathy. I think that's definitely like a classic. So I'll keep that one. I'll just say that one just to say it. But I think that the other thing would be, right now, I think laughter. We're doing a lot of chaotic laughter, so I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if it's making it better. I think at this point it's just a coping mechanism. I think that would make the world a better place. Honestly, I think knowing that, I think understanding that people are imperfect, and that the most perfect thing I think what makes something perfect is that it understands that it's flawed. And I think if we gave people similar compassion, which it does tie back to the empathy, but I think if we gave people similar compassion about that, there will be room for people to feel comfortable to make mistakes. And this ties with a lot of things. And there'll be room, and because people will feel comfortable to make mistakes, I think they'll be more open to feedback. And I think there's certain portions where it's like, not to get too deep into the politics, but there's sometimes where it's like, no, you're just wild. But I think that we as people, I'm definitely guilty of this, hold ourselves to this standard that's impossible. And so because it's impossible, we're always trying to attain it. And because we're always trying to attain it, we're never fully happy. I think that starts with us, and then starts going out externally, where then we also then hold people to these unattainable standards and that type of thing. And so I think that can help. I think the other thing I would say is, this might sound counterintuitive, but I think if people mind their business a lot more and worried less about what other people are doing, and just focus on yourself. Like, honestly, I really think a lot of the world's problems would happen if people minded their business less, especially the U.S. And so, minded their business more. I'm sorry. I think if more people minded their business and just focus on themselves and focus on what they were doing, I think that would solve a lot of the world's problems. But for some reason, we care so much about what other people are doing. I think it causes a lot. We care about imparting our wishes on other people. It causes a lot more harm than good. So that would be my thing. What about you? That's a good question.
Oh, what would I make? You know what? No one's ever asked me a question back on the podcast yet, so thank you for being the first. I'm not sure I've got the clarity of words to express as beautifully as you've done. I think we need to understand each other better. We don't understand cultures. Like you're saying about, we don't understand all this creativity bursting out in Nigeria. And we read the news, or we read what Google wants us to read the news, or newspaper editors want us to read. And we make judgments on whole masses of people that we don't know. And we look where the world's got us. We've got, in the UK, Brexit, which I'm not going to go deep into. And in America, we've got Trump and all his supporters. And everything that these people are against, I don't think they understand them. You turn the news on and they're talking about China being this domineering, oppressive, terrible country where everyone is having the human rights smashed. And you know what? It's not perfect. People there are so amazing and lovely and warm, way more than the UK, from my experience. And the only way I've known that is because I, went there, taught there, got into the culture and wanted to understand it. And that took a lot of work to get into the culture and see it for what it is. And I think in daily lives, if we understand that we don't understand and want to really connect with people, we've got to listen and put all ideas and prejudices aside.
Yeah.
That'd be a start.
That's a great answer. Yeah, that's a great answer. It's the want to understand. Yeah. That's good. You did great. This is as I'm playing the interviewer role.
Do I pay you therapy now?
Yeah. This is great. It's
been fantastic, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. So, Mariam, if people want to get in touch with you to talk about any of the work you're doing, and particularly the Kimoyo Fellowship, how can they do it?
Yes. So the best way is Twitter. I will say I take a long time to respond, but Twitter, Braimah _ that's MBRAIMAH _. Someone took Braimah without the underscore, so I had to use that on Twitter. But Twitter is probably my most favorite means of communicating through there, and on the site too of Camoyo. We if you go KimoyoFellowship.org, we have a response form and contact us form, so those emails get responded to fairly quickly. So yeah, that would probably be the best thing. And this was awesome. I'm so happy we got to connect here. So I look forward to any other thoughts people may have about anything I said. I'm always open to hear.
Thank you, Mariam, for being part of the podcast. If you are inspired by the Kimoyo Fellowship and want to find out more, the email is in the show notes below. So go check it out and look forward to speaking to you soon.